I raised my nephew, like my own son, after my sister abandoned him, only for her to come back. Years later, and sue me for custody after I inherited a house. When I was 25, I made a choice that would change the entire course of my life. I took in my nephew after my sister abandoned him. She didn't even leave a note, no phone call, no explanation. One day I came home from work and found a social worker standing on my doorstep, holding a frightened 6-year-old boy by the hand. "Are you Ethan?" she asked. I nodded, heart hammering against my ribs. Then she told me my sister had named me as the emergency contact, and that no one else had stepped forward. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't rich. I wasn't ready. I barely had enough space in my tiny one-bedroom apartment, but none of that mattered. Because the second I saw Oliver's terrified little face, I knew I couldn't let him fall through the cracks the way my sister had. He needed me. And for the first time in my life, someone needing me didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a calling. I became a parent overnight. No training, no warning. Just love. Raw, clumsy, desperate love. I worked double shifts. I learned how to fix broken toys, build forts out of couch cushions, and read the same superhero story 100 times without falling asleep. We figured it out together, me and him. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, we became a family. I thought the hard part was over. I thought we were safe. I thought love was enough. I didn't know that the real betrayal was still waiting. Years later, just around the corner, waiting with a lawyer, a custody suit, and a smile full of lies. Before everything fell apart, I would have told you my sister and I were close. Not perfect. We fought like all siblings do, but there was love there. Or at least, I thought there was. Her name was Rachel. She was 2 years older than me, and growing up, she was everything I wasn't. Wild, unpredictable, magnetic, in a way that made people follow her without even thinking. Where I was steady, she was a hurricane. Where I built safety nets, she burned bridges just to see the sparks. Still, she was my sister. I spent most of my teenage years dragging her out of bad parties, lying to our parents about where she was, covering for her when she got into trouble. It wasn't even a question. That's what family did. When Rachel got pregnant at 19, no one was surprised, and least of all me. The father disappeared faster than you could blink, and Rachel, she tried, at first. She really did. There were nights she'd call me sobbing, terrified she wasn't ready, that she'd mess everything up. I told her she wouldn't. I told her she was stronger than she thought. I believed it. I needed to believe it. But as the months turned into years, it became clear that motherhood didn't tame her. It caged her. She resented the responsibility, resented Oliver, resented anyone who expected her to be more than the wild, free spirit she still believed she was. By the time Oliver was 6, Rachel was barely holding it together. A new boyfriend every month, missed school meetings, nights out that turned into weekends away with no explanation, and then she was gone. No warning, no goodbye. Just a signed piece of paper leaving guardianship to me, the brother who had spent his whole life trying to catch her when she fell. I told myself she'd come back, that it was just temporary, that no matter how bad things got, she wouldn't really abandon her own son. I was wrong, dead wrong. The early days with Oliver were messy. He barely spoke at first, just clung to my leg like a shadow, wide-eyed and silent. Every loud noise made him flinch. Every sudden movement sent him shrinking into himself. He didn't trust me. Not really. How could he? Every adult in his life had either left him or let him down. Why would I be any different? At night I could hear him crying through the thin walls of our tiny apartment. He tried to be quiet about it, muffling the sobs into his blanket, but I heard every single one. And every time it felt like something inside me cracked a little more. I had no idea what I was doing. No parenting books, no guide. Just instinct and a deep, aching determination not to fail him the way everyone else had. We built our life one tiny ritual at a time. Pancakes every Sunday morning, no matter how broke we were. Silly handshakes before school drop-offs. Movies on the old beat-up couch every Friday night. Always his pick, even if it meant sitting through animated dinosaurs for the 100th time. I wasn't perfect. There were days I lost my patience. Days I wanted to lock myself in the bathroom and scream. Days when the exhaustion felt heavier than my own bones. But every night, when I tucked Oliver into bed and he wrapped his little arms around my neck, whispering, "I love you, Uncle Ethan," it made every second worth it. Slowly, the fear faded from his eyes. Slowly, the silences between us filled with laughter, stories, inside jokes only we understood. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. We were healing. We were becoming a family. Not the one either of us had been given, but the one we had chosen day after messy, beautiful day. And for the first time in a long, long time, I thought maybe fate had finally given us a break. I thought we were safe. I thought love had finally won. But, as I would learn, love isn't always enough to keep the wolves from coming back. It started with whispers. A neighbor at the grocery store who mentioned seeing Rachel around town. An old high school friend who casually dropped that she'd heard Rachel was doing better now. A text from a number I didn't recognize, just a single line, "She's back." I tried not to let it rattle me. People came and went all the time. Rachel had a long history of burning bridges and crawling back only when it suited her. Besides, she hadn't tried to contact us. She hadn't knocked on my door. She hadn't asked about Oliver. Maybe, just maybe, she realized that some damage was too deep to undo. I held onto that hope like a shield, convincing myself that our life was safe, that our little world was untouchable. Oliver was thriving. He was doing well in school, making friends, laughing more easily. The dark shadows that had once clung to him were fading, replaced by a light I fought like hell to protect. We had built something real, something strong. I refused to believe she could tear that down just by showing her face again. But deep down, in the quiet hours when the world went still and the doubts crept in, I knew better. Rachel didn't do quiet. She didn't do apologies. She did chaos. And chaos never knocked politely before it tore your house apart. The official notice arrived on a Thursday. A plain white envelope shoved into my mailbox, so ordinary it almost got lost between bills and grocery flyers. No knock, no warning. Just a letter. Neat, clinical, devastating. Rachel was suing me for custody of Oliver. I stood there on the front porch, the paper shaking in my hands, reading the words over and over until they blurred into a smear of disbelief. Petition for custody. Allegations, unfit guardian. Failure to provide proper family environment. Emotional alienation. Every sentence felt like a punch to the gut. I stumbled inside, sat down at the kitchen table and stared at Oliver's half-finished science project spread out across the surface. A homemade volcano, bright red paint still drying, unfit environment, alienation. Was that what they saw when they looked at our life? Or was this never about Oliver at all? The answer came quicker than I wanted to believe. Rachel hadn't just come back to be a mother. She came back because our grandmother had passed away 6 months earlier and left her house to me. A modest 2-bedroom home, but fully paid off, sitting on a nice piece of land. A house Rachel had always dreamed of but never earned. A house she now wanted, and figured taking Oliver back would be her golden ticket to it. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about family. It was about ownership, control, greed. And the sickest part of it all? She wasn't coming alone. She had a slick lawyer, a sob story polished and ready for court. And the convenient narrative that painted me, the man who had given up everything to raise her child, as the villain. I sat there for a long time that night, long after Oliver had gone to bed, the legal papers heavy in my lap. Part of me wanted to believe it wasn't real, that this was just another one of Rachel's impulsive disasters that would fizzle out once she realized she couldn't bluff her way through it. But deep down, I knew better. This was war, and she was willing to tear apart everything to get what she wanted, including the boy she once left behind without a second glance. I spent the next few weeks caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every day was a new battle. Meetings with lawyers, filing endless paperwork, scraping together every piece of evidence to prove that I was the one who had raised Oliver, not just babysat him. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every spare moment was swallowed by the case. And through it all, I had to pretend for Oliver's sake that everything was fine, that life was normal, that bedtime stories and math homework and soccer practice still mattered. He knew something was wrong. Kids always do. But he trusted me enough not to ask, and that trust, that quiet, fragile faith, was the only thing that kept me standing. The day of the first hearing, I woke up before the sun, already sweating, heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. I stared at my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, wondering if I looked like someone who deserved to be called a father, or if all they'd see was a scared man trying not to drown. I buttoned up the one good shirt I owned, tucked in the loose ends of my life the best I could, and walked out the door. I left Oliver with a neighbor for the first hearing, just the paperwork, just the formalities. I promised myself I wouldn't drag him into the mess unless it became absolutely necessary. But deep down, I knew the day would come when he would have to stand with me, or be torn away from me. When I pulled into the courthouse parking lot, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key to shut off the engine. I sat there for a long time, staring at the gray stone building, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. This was it. This was where everything we had built would either be protected or torn apart. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. The courtroom smelled like cold coffee and desperation. It wasn't like the movies, no dramatic gasps or slamming fists, just tired voices, paperwork rustling, the low murmur of ruined families tearing each other apart, one motion at a time. When Rachel walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked polished, expensive. like someone who had spent the last 6 months preparing not just her case, but her costume. Tight black dress, tidy professional hair, a single tear sliding down her cheek right on cue as her lawyer laid out the story. The story where she was the grieving mother, tragically separated from her beloved son by a bitter, unstable brother. The story where Oliver was being alienated from his true family. The story where my home, the one I had built out of blood and hope, was an emotionally unhealthy environment. Every word felt like sandpaper across my skin. I wanted to scream, to stand up and rip their lies apart, one by one. But I sat there, jaw locked, hands clenched in fists so tight my nails dug bloody crescents into my palms. Because that's what good people do in court. They stay calm. They let their lawyers fight the battle, and my lawyer, God bless her, fought like hell. She laid out the timeline. She showed the judge the emergency guardianship papers Rachel had signed and abandoned. She showed Oliver's school records, his grades, his awards, his glowing teacher evaluations. She showed the apartment lease in my name, the pay stubs, the healthcare forms, the sleepless nights stitched into every document. She showed that I hadn't just been a babysitter, I had been a father. I had been everything Rachel chose not to be. Still, doubt hung heavy in the room. Because blood is a stubborn thing. And no matter how many scars it leaves, it still carries weight in courtrooms. Rachel cried on cue, talked about turning her life around, talked about rebuilding the family Oliver deserved. I sat there, feeling like the walls were closing in, powerless against the story she spun so effortlessly. And when Oliver's name was called, when they asked if he wanted to speak, I felt my heart crack open. He was 10 years old, just a kid. He shouldn't have had to carry this weight, but when he stood up, small, trembling, but somehow unbroken, and said, "I want to stay with Uncle Ethan," I knew. No matter how ugly this got, no matter how much they lied, no matter how much it hurt, we weren't alone. Not anymore. After the hearing ended, Oliver and I drove home together. He sat quietly in the passenger seat, clutching the ragged edge of his backpack, his face turned toward the window. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. The silence between us wasn't angry, it wasn't awkward. It was something heavier, something raw. When we got home, he went straight to his room without being asked. I heard the soft click of his door closing, the quiet shuffle of him settling into the only world he could still control. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the closed door. Then I stumbled into the living room, dropped onto the couch, and let the weight of it all crush me. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken. I buried my face in my hands, trying to breathe through the storm inside me. Fear, doubt, exhaustion so deep it felt like it was stitched into my bones. What if they're right? What if I'm not enough? What if everything I've built for him is just an illusion? I thought about every failure, every time I snapped because I was too tired, every broken promise I never meant to break, every moment I wondered if someone better could have given him more. I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't stop. And that's when I felt it. The weight of a small, familiar blanket settling around my shoulders, the quiet shuffle of footsteps beside me. I looked up, and there he was, Oliver, standing awkwardly next to the couch, holding the blanket like it was armor. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just sat down beside me, his shoulder brushing against mine, silent and steady, choosing me, even when the world told him he had every right not to. And in that moment, I realized something that all the court documents and accusations couldn't erase. I wasn't fighting for a house. I wasn't fighting for pride. I was fighting for this, for the quiet, stubborn, unconditional love we had built when no one else stayed. And no matter what the next hearing brought, no matter how brutal it got, I would fight for him until there was nothing left of me to give. Because he was my son, not by blood, not by law, by choice, and that choice meant everything. It happened a few days after the hearing. I found Oliver sitting on the back steps of our apartment, his knees pulled up to his chest, his face buried in his arms. At first, I thought he was just tired. He'd been quiet lately, quieter than usual, slipping through the days like a ghost, doing what he was told, nodding when spoken to, but never really there. I sat down beside him without a word. The evening air was cool, carrying the sharp bite of the coming winter. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the patchy backyard we shared with the neighboring building. For a long time, we just sat there. I didn't push, I didn't prod. I just waited. And eventually, inevitably, the dam broke. His shoulders started to shake, almost imperceptibly at first, then harder, deeper, until the quiet, muffled sobs turned into full-body tremors. I reached out, pulling him against me, feeling how small he still was, despite how tall he'd gotten this past year. "I don't want to go with her," he choked out, the words raw and broken against my chest. "I don't even know her anymore." I closed my eyes, fighting the sting behind them, fighting the thousand things I wanted to say. Promises I wasn't sure I could keep, reassurances that felt too fragile to speak aloud. Instead, I just held him tighter. "I'm scared, Uncle Ethan," he whispered. "She'll take me away and you'll be all alone." My heart shattered right there on those splintered wooden steps. Because in all of this, the court battles, the lies, the legal jargon, I had been so focused on protecting him that I hadn't realized he had been trying to protect me too, even when he was the one who needed protecting most. I pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. "You are not going anywhere," I said, my voice low and steady, more a vow than a comfort. "And even if somehow they made you leave, you would never be alone. Not for a single second. You hear me?" He nodded, wiping at his cheeks with the sleeve of his hoodie. "You're my family," he said, voice cracking on the last word. "My real family." I didn't have words big enough for the moment, so I didn't try. I just sat there, holding him against me as the stars blinked awake overhead, the world shrinking down to just the two of us. And I made another silent promise that night. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, whatever pieces of myself I had to burn to keep him safe, I would do it. Because love isn't just about staying, it's about fighting. And I wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. The final hearing felt like walking into a battlefield. Rachel was already there, sitting stiff and composed in her neat black dress, her lawyer beside her, radiating false confidence. I sat down with Oliver next to me, his small hand gripping mine hard enough to hurt, but I didn't pull away. I needed him as much as he needed me. The arguments started almost immediately. Rachel's lawyer wasn't just pushing for custody anymore. He had filed an additional motion, one I hadn't expected at first. Given that Ethan Carter's residence, the property inherited from his late grandmother, constitutes the primary household for the minor child, and given that the current guardian's stability is in question, we request that the property be reassigned under guardianship control for the child's best interest. In plain English, if Rachel won custody, she wouldn't just take Oliver, she'd take the house too. The house my grandmother had left to me after years of trusting me to hold the family together. The home where Oliver and I had built a life out of the wreckage Rachel had left behind. It wasn't about love, it was about possession. It always had been. They spun their web of half-truths expertly, painting me as unstable because I worked too many hours, claiming I isolated Oliver from his rightful family, suggesting that I clung to the house, not because it was our home, but because I was selfish and controlling. I sat there, fists clenched in my lap, my jaw locked so tight it hurt. But when it was our turn, my lawyer cut through their lies with the simple truth. We presented the original guardianship documents Rachel had signed and abandoned. We showed her arrest records for reckless behavior in the years after she left. We reminded the court who had stepped up when she had disappeared without a word. And then, the hardest part, the judge asked Oliver if he wanted to speak. My heart nearly stopped. But Oliver stood up. His voice was shaky, but clear. "I want to stay with Uncle Ethan. I want to stay in our house. I don't want to go with her." Just a few sentences. Simple. Devastating. The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned back, hands folded, his gaze sweeping slowly between me, Oliver, and Rachel. And then he spoke. "The petition for custody transfer is denied. Guardianship remains with Ethan Carter. Motion regarding property reassignment is also denied. Case closed." I couldn't move for a moment, could barely breathe. Then I felt Oliver slam into me, arms wrapped tight around my chest, face pressed against my shoulder. We had won. Not just custody, not just the right to stay together. We had defended our home, our life, our future. Rachel stormed out of the courtroom without a word, but I stayed there for a long moment holding Oliver, feeling the weight of all the battles we had fought. And finally, it felt like we weren't just surviving. We had truly, finally won. In the weeks after the final hearing, life didn't magically return to normal. There were no fireworks, no great celebrations, just slow, quiet healing. I fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen. I helped Oliver finish his science project, a real one this time, no courtroom stress weighing us down. We went back to Sunday pancakes, lazy Saturday movie nights, evenings spent kicking a battered soccer ball around the cracked driveway. The world didn't stop turning because we had survived. It just asked us to keep moving. Sometimes I still woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, half convinced someone was going to knock on the door and try to rip everything away again. But then I'd hear Oliver's soft snore through the thin walls, or I'd find his sneakers kicked off by the front door, the dog-eared comic book on the couch, the half-eaten cereal bowl left on the table, proof that we were still here, still standing, still ours. Rachel didn't try to reach out after the ruling. Maybe she realized there was nothing left for her to take. Maybe she finally understood that love, real love, can't be claimed with a legal document. Or maybe she just moved on, chasing the next thing she thought would make her happy. Either way, I didn't waste time wondering. I used to think family was about blood, about obligation, about sticking together no matter what. But now I know better. Family is the people who choose you, even when it's hard. The ones who stay, not because they have to, but because they want to. Oliver chose me, I chose him. And every single day we keep choosing each other, not out of guilt, not out of fear, out of love, out of something deeper and fiercer than anything a courtroom could ever understand. We're not perfect. Our house still creaks in winter. Our dinners sometimes come out of a microwave. Our fights are loud and our apologies are clumsy. But it's ours, our home, our life, our family. And no one, no judge, no lawyer, no ghost from the past will ever take that away again. Not while I'm breathing, not while we're still standing together.